Are you at a crossroads in your life? Are you? Are you wondering what's next and hoping it'll be a step in the right direction? I don't know. Welcome to Your Next Bold Move. Our show is all about helping you take your next step, whether it's career or relationships or life in general. Second acts do exist. Second chances do exist. And so stay tuned and let's explore together what's next for you. Hi, and welcome to Your Next Bold Move. My name is Wendy Kaplan. Our TV show is about providing you with inspiration and information to help you figure out what's next for you, and then to make that bold move. Bold moves can be personal or professional, but whatever it is for you, let us help you get started and get supported. Today's show is focused on work and career. Many people have been in the same career or industry or job for a long time, and then the industry changes and the market changes, and then one day you wake up and discover if you don't change too, you could be in trouble. In today's world, we must expand and grow into new areas all the time. And our guests today are John Agostinelli, owner of World Properties-Agostinelli Real Estate in Ashland, Massachusetts, and Chris Michaud, owner of Acceptance Group Real Estate in Westford, Mass. Chris and John have been working partners in the real estate business for many years, and just as an aside, Chris and I are partners in a different way since we're married. Okay, you two, so thanks for being here today, and I'm excited to talk about what's happening in your business and in your world and how that's related to making a bold move for yourselves. So John, why don't we start with you, and why don't we start by just telling a little bit about yourself?
Sure, Wendy. Thanks for having me on the show.
You're welcome.
I graduated from the University of Maine with a business degree and a concentration in finance. And my first job out of school was with Shawmut Bank, where I worked for 3 years in the commercial loan department as a credit analyst. That job gave me a great skill set and a great base for financial and credit analysis. And from there, I went to the FDIC. My first job with the FDIC, I was in the investigations unit, taking a look at why the banks failed, whether it was fraud or poor underwriting standards. From there, I went in, was promoted to a real estate specialist, basically working on non-performing assets that were secured by real estate. So at that time, we would try to get them to performing status by restructuring the debt. And quite often with the real estate developers, that wasn't the case, and we had to foreclose on them. At that point, I was promoted to foreclosure specialist and basically handled foreclosures in Massachusetts, southern New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. And from there, in 1997, I started Agostinelli Contracting. Basically, the company built spec homes from 1997 through 2006. And I saw
Good time to be in that business, right?
Well, yeah, I wrote it all the way up, and we peaked out around 2005.
Yeah.
And I saw the margins slipping fast. And fortunately, I'm a relatively small operator. I had 2 houses under construction at that time. Sold both of those properties and saw the writing on the wall that it was time to move into something else. During that time, I also started Agostinelli Real Estate, a real estate brokerage company. I started in 1998, basically listing and selling the properties constructed by my construction business. And so in 2006, when I sold the last spec home, I had to make a decision which way I was going to go. So I decided to go full bore with the real estate brokerage business, and that's when I purchased the World Properties International franchise.
Yeah.
And that's how Chris and I met.
Great.
And we met and we were talking about the business, what was going on in the real estate market, and we decided to join forces and go after the bank-owned properties. Now, we were a little bit ahead of the curve. We saw what was going to happen before it really started to happen.
Yeah.
And we were knocking on doors, showing up at bank headquarters, and we were surprised at how many people would actually meet with us. And we did that for about 6 months with no headway. And then finally one of the banks, we found a client, and they gave us several assets
and launched the
business.
That side of the business, right? Which is great. So your background, it's interesting. We'll talk about Chris's background in a second, but what's interesting for me, just listening to you, is how each job sort of built on the one before. You have a really good foundation in banks and did some foreclosure stuff and worked with credits, and each of those were like foundation that built on the next step. So most people think, well, I have to be in one line of work like my whole life, or how do I actually, take the skills that I have and move into the next thing, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But I really love that your background, the way you described it, really highlights that. So, and then we'll talk about sort of where your business is in a sec. So, Chris, how about you, honey?
Hey, well, thanks for having us both.
Yeah, you're
It's
welcome.
really great to be here. My background goes back 30 years, and I've been in the real estate business in 3 different states, in Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. I've been here since the early 90s. And at one point, I was very involved with the professional organizations, our realtor trade group, and I held all the offices you could hold, including the president-elect of the state of Maine. And I wound up at one point doing some lobbying, assisting the association doing some lobbying in Washington for housing bills in Maine. And I learned a lot of business skills along the way, met and developed a lot of relationships with buyers and sellers and investors. And I was looking to change the business model when I got down here. And what I found in place I wasn't really happy with. So I decided to, at one time I affiliated myself with one of the major franchises, and I have either worked for or owned Century 21, Coldwell Banker, a number of them, including World Properties, which John and I purchased together. And I've also worked and owned independent companies. So we tweaked the model a little. John and I actually have tweaked this model, but I recognized some skills that John had, some complementary skills that I did not have.
Which talks about your partnership.
That's
right?
correct.
Yeah.
And so we allied ourselves into really a joint venture that works for both of us. And at different times we've worked closer together for longer periods of times, and we are still occasional partners, and we do joint ventures together.
Yeah, so one of the things that John brings, so it's a great opportunity to talk about partnership, because it's really great when you're a solopreneur, you only are good at what you're good at. And it's really great, especially when you're small, to bring in someone to work with that complements your skill set. So John came with the building background and some of the other things that you mentioned a few moments ago, and you had more number of years in actually buying and selling homes than John did. So together, you made quite a team, really, from a skill perspective.
Yeah, and I had a great deal of marketing skills and agent managerial skills too, and so we weren't exactly sure which direction we were going to go in the beginning. Yeah.
Right, great. So you guys have been in business together, and the reason I asked you to be on the show is because you're both at a crossroads now, figuring out what's next for you, and I appreciate the opportunity to have you come and talk about it. So because so many other people are at the same crossroads, right? I said this in the beginning, they've been doing the same work for a long time, and a lot of people wake up and say, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Not that there's anything wrong. Sometimes it's the business that they're in that they don't like. And sometimes they're just tired of it. They've been doing it for a while and they think they maybe want to do something else, but wonder, am I too old? Do I really want to start something new? Does it mean I got to start at the beginning? What about income? So those are all conversations that we've had, right, together, and both of you together. So let's talk about sort of what you're thinking about now. John, do you want to start with that?
Well, I'm in the process of making the decision of which way to go. So there are several ways I could go, which would be continuing down the path that I'm on right now, which is primarily focusing on bank-owned properties, but we're seeing a reduction in number of bank-owned properties that are hitting the market for a number of reasons. The robo-signing, the desire for principal reductions, and maybe even pushing short sales. And all these might be beneficial to the overall economy, but for my business in particular, it's slowing down. So I will need to, if I'm going to stay in the real estate brokerage business, I need to focus on traditional sales and short sales.
And traditional sales means, just so people who aren't familiar.
Sure, a traditional sale is just a typical sale where someone has more equity in their home or excuse me, has equity in their home,
Right.
and is just looking to
To sell
the property,
or buy it.
or to buy a
Right?
property.
Okay.
A short sale is where someone owes more than the property is worth,
Right.
and they need to get the permission of the bank really to allow them to sell it short of the payoff figure.
Great.
So that's one avenue I could go, but I'm exploring my options, and this might be an opportunity to go in another direction.
Right.
I was in banking for 8 years. I was in the home construction business for 9 years.
Right.
I've been a real estate broker for 14 and focusing on bank properties for 5 years.
Right.
So I've made
Lots of choices.
some career changes in the past,
Yes.
and it might be time for a new challenge.
Yeah, it's great. So thanks for sort of walking us through your thinking. Chris, is that same for you, or sort of where are you in the process?
Well, we see, both John and I see that the industry is changing. So
The real estate
the
industry,
real estate
yeah.
industry. It's as you know, it's come on hard times in the last 5 years, and John and I recognized that opportunity early on this time around, and this is my third cycle. And though this one is probably worse than any of the others I've been through. So what we're doing is we're reassessing the situation, and we see it changing yet again. I won't say that the market is going to turn into the traditional market that we know. What we're going to have for a while, another 4 or 5 years is our best guess,
Sure.
is that we're going to see continued foreclosures and short sales, and there are going to be new ways of doing business, I think. So in my case anyway, I'm more focused on that area, like short sales, yes, and I would like to tweak the system a little bit, because I think that we could improve the quality of service to our customers and our clients. To be honest with you, I'm not terribly impressed with the way the industry operates sometimes in general, and so I think we can do that. We know how to, John and I know how to run very efficient organizations, and I think that's important. It can improve our quality of service, I think, to the public.
Okay, so you're thinking, so where John is exploring options based on his background and experience and prior positions, you're thinking more about staying, not that you're not staying, John, because you
Sure.
may stay or take a piece of what you've learned over the last 5 years and roll it into what's next, which I imagine you'll probably do. Your focus is more in what area, Chris?
My focus is staying in the real estate industry, but maybe tweaking the parameters of the industry and tweaking my operations. We currently have an office in Springfield, and I'd like to add to that, and by the end of June I want to add several other spaces.
So you want to grow your
I
real
do.
estate company
I do.
and
And-
stay in that line of
Yeah,
work,
and
right?
I want to tweak the process a little based on some of the things that John and I have done over the past several years. And one of the things that John taught me is John is very skilled in the arena of finance. And John really knows how to manage very well, manage finances. And he really taught me a lot in these last few years, really has, and helped me become more efficient
Yeah.
in what I do.
And so that's something you want to continue forward
Absolutely.
with.
Absolutely.
And I imagine that even if you end up in different lines of work somehow, that you'll use each other as resources.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
It's been
Absolutely.
tremendously beneficial to both of us,
Yeah.
I think.
We actually, we were talking about this earlier today, that we actually have a kind of interesting, unique partnership. Like, we utilize each other's skills, almost like just-in-time skill sets as we need them. John doesn't hesitate to call me for counsel and advice on different things, and I don't hesitate
vice
to call
versa,
him either.
yeah.
And as we need to collaborate about something, we do. We do, and we have done.
So at one point you were like officially partners,
Yes.
and then you separated your companies
Yes.
and each had your individual franchises and then used each other's resources. So you go out, come in,
Yes.
go out, come in, and
Yes.
using each other.
Yes.
which
Quite
is
unique,
great.
I think.
Yeah, I think it's unique too. I think
quite
it's a great, well, I have, sort of additional insight just because I know you both personally and, we're married, so I get to have a different kind of a view on it. But I think it really is unique and special.
And it makes us very efficient.
It's true.
Very cost efficient.
Yeah, I believe that
and,
too.
we can actually invest more marketing dollars that way instead of having all the brick and mortar and some of the things that other people do.
Oh, so because you use each other's resources, you don't have an official like
Employees.
Century 21 office with
And
that people pay
employees,
for.
Right.
that's right. We use a lot of independent contractors, as a lot of agencies do.
Right.
But we also do it in other areas.
Okay, great. So let's move to what's next. So, John, you walked us through just a few minutes ago about not only your background, but some of your thinking. So our show is about helping inspire people to think about for themselves what might be next, so which is why I've spent so much time sort of talking about your backgrounds and how you're thinking, because other people are thinking the same way, even if they're in a different line of work, right? So what's some of your thinking about what's possible for you next? You're at this crossroads.
Sure.
You've got both of you have great long-term experience, expertise. So what are you thinking about?
Well, if I don't continue down the real estate brokerage path, I'm exploring options such as working for a hedge fund, hedge funds that purchase either bank-owned properties or delinquent notes. I think my skill set would work perfectly in that industry.
Yeah.
Or maybe even real estate consulting or just business consulting in general. So those are a few of the areas that I'm going to continue to explore, and maybe you can have me back in 6 months, a year from now, and I can tell you what my next bold move actually was.
And how it turned out.
Exactly.
I'm sure it's going to be fun. We talked
Sure.
about this earlier, that you are good at seeing when the industry changes or your job changes, you're sort of in the right place at the right time. Somehow you magically position yourself, and I don't imagine this will be any different. But it's not easy to be at a crossroads. Like last month we had someone on who got laid off from her job of 20-something years, and she was in human resources and was the person actually that laid other people off as her company was acquiring and in transition, and she was paralyzed by it. And so it's not easy to be at a crossroads, right? What's your thinking about it? Just so other people can sort of, get to see how it's not so, if other people are feeling that way, they might not be any different.
Sure, of course, doubts always enter your mind at some point, but I just look at my past experience going from one career to another. I've basically done it 3 times, and I was successful in the past, and I just use that experience and confidence moving forward.
That's
But
good.
of course, the doubts creep in your mind. I think it's only natural for that to happen.
Yeah, I think so too. Chris, do you want to add anything to that?
I think in my case, I don't have that kind of fear. I mean, both John and I have been entrepreneurs for a long time, and
Right.
we've done different things. I've owned land development companies and been involved in several side ventures, including software, and so I'm not worried about a career per se.
Yes.
But it is challenging when you take on a new direction. Anytime that you do that, change is often uncomfortable for people. So sure, there's some of that, at least there is for me. But that's what makes life exciting, and that's what's fun, is to take that next step forward, and that's what I'm looking forward to, actually.
Yeah. Well, it also, once you start stepping, they're a little less unknown, a little more known, and you
Right.
start to feel a
Right.
little better. You're in a little more momentum, and
That's right.
it sort of helps.
That's right.
My coach says if you had all the answers and it was all smooth, you're really not changing. You're just doing the same thing. So I think that's that's one way that I look at it when I get a little nervous.
Sure.
Very true.
So, John, let's go back to you. So, you're looking at the possibility of working for a hedge fund or maybe doing real estate consulting. Was there anything else that you wanted to add to that list?
Well, I mean, the list is really extensive because
Yes.
they're all little offshoots from that, but those are basically the 3 or 4 primary areas that I'm going to
Great.
explore, and I'm sure as I get further into the exploration that there might be another left-hand turn.
possibility.
Sure.
Right. And you really just started thinking about, this is sort of
Sure.
new, right?
right.
As you both have been talking together about, okay, this is what's happening in the industry, therefore we maybe should make some move for ourselves.
That's right. I mean, from many of the real estate seminars Chris and I attend, they kept on telling us, the servicers and the banks, next quarter you'll see an increase in bank-owned properties. Next quarter. We've heard that for 2.5 years.
Right.
So what's being said and what we know
Right.
and read,
Reality.
and then the reality
Right.
is we've seen a decrease in the number, and so now it's reaching a critical mass of, okay, the volume's getting to a point that it's not at the level of a business that I want it to be.
Right.
So now it's time to make a decision.
Right. It's actually probably better news for the for the people who own their homes that there's not as many foreclosures.
We
right?
hope.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so it's interesting to hear about it from the business standpoint. You know, actually having fewer foreclosures means there's less foreclosure business for those who are in that line of work.
But there are still some pretty big issues. This is a $2 trillion problem.
That's right.
Yeah,
This
it's
is a
more
big problem.
complicated
Yeah, it's
than-
more, it's more
That's what-
complex.
yeah.
That's
It's
right.
very complicated. It's, I wish it were more that the economy was getting better and less people were
Yes,
suffering.
of course.
But it's a lot of legal technicalities,
Right.
changes in the way the banks and services want to address this issue to help mitigate losses. But unfortunately, I think both Chris and I agree that we still have another 4 or 5 years before we work through the majority
Yes.
of these bank-owned properties or properties that are underwater.
Yeah. Okay, good. So, Chris, how about you in terms of what's your next bold move and what are you thinking about? You've already talked about how you're going to
Sure.
stay in the real estate business. So,
Sure.
for people watching, what do you need some help with?
Sure. I could use some help. Well, first of all, where I see the industry going is just the way John and I just spoke about it. But I think there are opportunities there for consumers to improve the quality of service. One of the things that John and I was not impressed with is early on we wanted to bring to the large lenders and servicers, we wanted to bring some expertise and knowledge and maybe enhance their ability to mitigate their losses. That means not lose so much money. We found out early on the banks were not interested in that. They were interested in conversion to cash. They needed it. You know, at that time, if you remember 2007, 2008, they were worried about the whole finance of the economy. It was going to implode. So we understood that. But after 5 years, some of the large banks have adopted the idea, oh my God, if we put in a few $1,000s, we can mitigate our losses a lot more. So we see some changes coming to the industry where we think we can improve the quality of service. Although we've talked about, at least that I see where I want to go. So I want to expand our operations, put in place
Your company
my
operations.
company,
Uh-huh.
and I'm actually looking for some agents that think out of the box, because I never liked being confined in the box the way a lot of the business is done. Like I was one of the first brokers in the area, and John and I run our office pretty remotely. We have agents that work remotely for us, keeps our overhead down. We can put more money into marketing, that sort of thing.
Right.
So that's really what I'm looking for.
Okay, so if someone's watching who's a licensed broker, real estate broker,
Or even unlicensed.
Or
You know,
someone
I'm
who'd be
willing to talk to some
interested.
individuals that are unlicensed.
okay, who might be interested in working for a growing entrepreneurial real estate company, you're interested in expanding in the Massachusetts area,
Yes, I am.
and so they should contact you.
Yes.
Okay, good. And so, John, if I just want to make sure that we're asking for what we want
Sure.
here, right? So, if people listening are someone who have connections or a network or know somebody who does, in which particular areas should they contact you?
Like we were discussing before, anything relating to real estate consulting, hedge funds, purchasing bulk REOs or bulk delinquent notes, or business consulting. Because basically everything that I've done since I went on my own in 1997 has been entrepreneurial, business related.
That's great.
And so any of those areas,
Great.
really.
One of the things that John and I didn't mention is that we both early on were placed on the Brokers Council of one of the largest servicers in the country. So we have, I think, kind of a unique insight into the industry,
Yes, I'd
and
say
have
we
a
do.
unique feel
Yeah.
into where that's going. And I'm now serving on the Broker Council. John served before me.
Right.
And now John is part of their ambassador program, which is a little broader community of former council members. And so I'm not saying we have a great deal of influence necessarily, but we do have some knowledge that
Right,
a lot of people
you
don't
both
have.
know a lot
Yes.
and have
Yes, we do.
insight sort of behind the scenes
Sure.
into
Yes, we
the
do.
real estate
Yes, we do.
industry and the market and the foreclosure market. Well, certainly more than anybody I know, but
Yes, yes, we do.
probably more than most people,
Yes.
and probably more than the traditional broker.
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
You know, because you've been so immersed in this. And so we didn't say this, but I'm wondering if anybody's interested in buying a piece of foreclosure property or
Or
could
traditional, or do a short sale.
That's right.
Call.
Anything to do
related
with
to real estate.
That's
They
right.
should call both of you.
You got it.
That's right.
You got it.
I
That's
might as well
right.
give you some business.
That's
Sure.
right. That's
Why
right.
not?
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. So anything, any tips, you know, as we're sort of closing down here, are there any tips that sort of the average person who's either trying to buy or sell that you'd like to leave people with? I mean, we didn't talk about this ahead and being planned for it, but
Sure.
I thought while we have a few minutes, is there anything that you can think of that would be helpful for somebody to know?
Well, one of the things that I would advise people is we've seen recently that some of the large lenders were not particularly adept at what they were doing when they started this foreclosure process. And in Massachusetts, we have a proactive attorney general, and she's taken on these large banks. For good or ill, whatever your belief is, she's taken them on. And there were a couple of court cases that illustrated to us how difficult this process is, and the foreclosure process may have been done incorrectly in many cases.
Yes.
So my best advice is that consumers, buyers or sellers, should get legal advice when they're buying a foreclosure, because there's a
Great.
difference between insurable title and free and clear marketable title that people have found out.
Which is another whole
Recently.
show, right?
That's right.
How
That's
to
right. It's
buy and
another whole
sell.
show. But I would say, you know, in this environment, you really need an attorney to walk you through those contracts, and a very competent realtor. You really do. It's
Of
a
course,
tough
and
game.
they should call both of you.
Absolutely.
So, John, any last tip in just the last
Sure.
minute we
For
have?
buyers, there's great opportunity in purchasing either bank-owned or short sale.
Right.
But there are cons of it too, and some of the cons are how long it takes the bank to
Right.
respond. You have to be willing to deal with some hurdles that are going to come up. But with that, there's an opportunity to potentially buy property for less than market value.
Great.
So, like Chris was saying, you need to have an experienced real estate agent or broker representing you that understands short sales or bank-owned properties in the process. And if you do so, there are certainly some great opportunities
That's
there.
great. Thank you. Well, I'm delighted to have had you both here. The time just flies by, doesn't it?
It
Oh my
does,
gosh.
it does.
You've just had a chance to hear John Agostinelli and Chris Michaud tell their stories about their making a career change or not a career change as they're expanding their line of work. I'm hoping it gave you some kind of inspiration for yourself to help maybe even ignite you into some action regarding your work or maybe changing your line of work. And if you know of an opportunity for John in regard to his next bold move, he can be reached at john@agostinelli.com. And for Chris, if you're a licensed realtor or somebody who might be interested in getting into the real estate business, he's interested in expanding his company, his entrepreneurial real estate company, and he can be reached at www.acceptancegroup.com. Thanks for joining us today, and in addition to the resources and ideas shared with us by Chris and John, you can go online to our websites and join our community for some free support and inspiration. And we can be found at visionquestconsulting.com and themagicparties.com, where you will find everything you need to help you figure out what's next and what might be your next bold move. A big thank you again to our guests, John and Chris, for being
Thank
here
you,
today. And thanks to Pete and our production crew, Monica and Warren and Pat, who make our show possible. And thanks to you, our listeners. You are meant to go forth in the world to use your gifts and talents and have a little fun exploring what's next inside of you waiting to burst forth. And join us next time as we continue to inspire each other to make our next bold move. Thanks for joining us.